It's also what happens when you listen to the radio host, Alex Jones.
Move, bitch! Get out the way!
We pledge allegiance to one flag, and that flag is the American flag.
InfoWars helped fuel the rumor that President Obama is an ISIS supporter.
It's been a cozy relationship from the beginning. I will not let you down. You will be very, very impressed, I hope. And I think we'll be speaking a lot. Donald Trump and Alex Jones.
This means that Donald Trump will be the 45th president of the United States.
Waging war on corruption. It's
Alex Jones.
Yeah, it's going to be definitely an interesting short period of time here. I don't think that there's necessarily a conspiracy. I don't think that there's like a secret room in the EU in Brussels where they talk about how they're going to do this. It's more like a common jellyfish brain. That's where they're all tending to go.
Sure, it's an atmosphere.
You can give truth serum to Ben Rhodes and his brother, the president of CBS, and they'll both swear that they're not in, cahoots to start this war with over Israel. But they all the jellyfish are swimming hard in that direction. That's how I would look at it.
Sure, and I mean, even if folks have some issues with Israel, let's just throw that out there and say, sure, Israel does some things that aren't perfect. It's different political parties. It's like any nation. The obsession with it, the mental illness, and now trying to start a war. Don't people get that Israel has nukes?
Yeah, Israel has nukes, and they have what they call the Samson option, which is, if before they get pushed into the sea, they're going to take out every Arab capital, plus Pakistan, et cetera. So and unfortunately, though, they did surveys in places like Pakistan that said if we could nuke Israel, wipe them out, kill all the Jews, but 100 million Arabs would die, that overwhelmingly is supported. It would be worth it. Even if our capitals were nuked, if it's the end of the Jews, that's the extent of the hate on that's been built inside of the Arab mind, the Muslim mind for Jews, the extreme hate on, to where they'll even send their 7, 8-year-old daughters out as suicide bombers. This comes from an incredible hate. Tying it back to the left in the United States, you see the professor with the all I want for Christmas is white genocide. You see a course out in Wisconsin at a major university that's,
the problem with whiteness.
With whites.
Yeah,
the problem with whiteness. This is what you do before the Hutus and the Tutsis go at it. This is what you do before the Serbs and the Kosovo Albanians go at it. You whip up this hate on.
And by the way, let me just stop you because this is so key. In the WikiLeaks are literally hundreds of emails saying our culture control isn't working. We need to go to demographic warfare. That's the top Democrats saying demographic warfare means race war, and they're out there priming it to an insane level. This is just crazy.
Then when you just see the lack of social control, when you see what's happened at the malls, and you think this was for fun, it was organized mainly on social media, something cool is going to happen at such and such a time and place. But imagine people with so little control that they'll go to a place where they think there will be fights, looking for excitement. Imagine if the power is out, the water has not run in a week, the food is completely out of the apartment, then what? I mean, look at the lack of social control today on full stomachs with electricity working. Imagine in the dark. So today, I think the next form of warfare, I'm not nearly as worried about ICBMs streaking across the polar ice caps. I mean, that can't be ruled out. But I'm much more worried about cyber attacks that don't come with a return address, that just target our biggest Achilles heel, which is our cities being.
And Matt, if you look at the Soros,
sure,
if you look at the Soros attack plan, they could launch the false flag to destabilize us. They're the ones that want to destabilize us. They're the ones trying to hand Trump a destabilized Middle East. They admit that. Why do you think Obama's doing this right at the end? It's not just about his legacy. This is about handing Trump a crisis.
Yeah, not only that, it's about holding on to it. It's analogous to the Billy Bush tape. The network had it a year ago. They waited. It was like having the ace up the sleeve at the poker game back in Tombstone. They waited, and then they dropped the ace at the perfect time with the Billy Bush tape. They thought it still didn't work. Well, this is Obama maximizing his leverage, doing this at a time when it's just obviously a backstab to the incoming Republicans and to Israel. Like you said, it's a hand grenade with the pin out being tossed to you, a hot potato. But it's crosses a lot. You talk about red lines. This crosses every Israeli's red line. They're now saying, forget about the West Bank, forget about the settlements, put that aside. They're saying East Jerusalem is occupied, we're trying to get a resolution. It's passed. East Jerusalem is occupied territory. That means the holiest sites in Judaism and Christianity should be under Muslim administration. And anything short of that will be, that will result in boycotts of Israeli products.
This is spectacular arrogance, and the majority religion within the religion of Islam, 80%, is Sunni Wahhabist garbage. They have said they want to blow up the holy sites in Jerusalem.
Sure, and remember also, this shows the preeminence of Islamic supremacism. This is supposedly their third holiest site after Mecca and Medina. Muhammad never visited. They kind of airbrushed and wrote in a hallucinogenic horse ride to Jerusalem in a dream by Muhammad some point after his death, or while he was taking a nap in the cave or somewhere. So they wanted to draw this powerful, important, critical, geographically and otherwise, city into the Islamic orbit. So they just declared that it's their third
and let's
holiest
expand.
City. Why don't we just declare that Mecca is the second holiest Christian city? I mean, it makes as much sense. But to have the threat of Muslim control, and that's backed by the UN, is huge. This means that Trump...
Sure, that's why we got you on. We've got to go to break. But, I mean, listen, the Islamists now blow up their own holy sites if they're Shiite. So there's a lot of Islamists that want to blow up the Christian shrines that are in Jerusalem. They want those removed, is my point. And I could see Obama there in the future speaking Arabic with a plunger blowing up, the Mount of Olives or something. Normally, we have a Christmas tree physically in the studio. But this year, I thought with our big video wall, why not shoot some HD video and then add snowflakes to it of the Christmas tree in front of the Texas Capitol. We did just that. And we actually got some emails and comments saying, I'm offended by your Christmas tree. Well, don't watch or listen to the show if you've been taught to hate our culture, what's left of it. So I thought we're just going to bring it back since people don't like it. That's the level of bullying we see with the anti-Trump people in the streets, the daughter of Trump being attacked on a plane. This is their attitude. All the folks that are getting arrested now in Florida trying to go kill Trump. This is getting really, really serious. And so I wanted to have Matt Bracken on to co-host with me in this hour and take your phone calls, because what does it signify, crossing red lines, to on Hanukkah hold on to this thing that Obama had been developing for years, as Bracken said, and then put it out on the most important Jewish holiday, that's undoubtedly the biggest Jewish holiday, hands down, comes at the same time as Christmas, but lasts for over a week, and to do this, to stir things up with all this racial and religious and ethnic and cultural division. And then on top of it, sign a bill that says the Board of Governors of the FCC will now be over all media, not just broadcast, but cable TV, print, internet, naming InfoWars in the committee hearings, and that they will decide what can be on the air and not, and basically take Cass Sunstein's plan from 8 years ago and start censoring. I mean, it actually says it. Fining us, suing us, blocking us. So Obama is doing all this at the end as if he's not leaving or something, or as if he doesn't think Trump's going to be able to reverse it. And then other people say, and this is my question for Matt Bracken, well, can Trump just appoint a bunch of czars and with executive orders reverse this? Well, Obama's doing it by executive orders, but also by law. And what does it say? That the Republican House and Senate went along with this free speech killing legislation that they call, listen to this, that they call Countering Information Warfare Act. But then it goes on to talk about how the Department of State, with the Secretary of Defense, the Director of National Intelligence, that's all the agencies, and the Broadcast Board of Governors of the FCC to establish a Center for Information Analysis and Response, which will pinpoint sources of disinformation, analyze data, and in true dystopic matter, that's from the bill, now I'm reading off, develop and disseminate fact-based narratives to counter effrontery propaganda. This is a short segment, long coming up. Matt Bracken, what do you make of all this red line crossing? Doesn't this signify they're getting ready to exponentially do something more? Because This is already a 10 on a 10 on the Richter scale.
Well, when I read about the FCC stuff, I think, thank God that Trump was elected. It's like sinking a U-boat when it had 15 torpedoes left. If we hadn't have sunk that U-boat, those 15 torpedoes would have done a lot of damage. Now, things like the FCC regulations, I think that they can be put aside by Trump if he wants to. They have.
But don't you agree we should be hearing that then?
I'm not sure what Trump's priorities are right now in terms of dealing with, the bigger issues like Jerusalem and, the UN thing. I mean, the next big moves, next macro moves on the chessboard are pretty easy to suss out. This is a very brilliant move by the enemy, including our president, Obama. It's a very brilliant move because you've already got the Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranian blocs hostile or against us. Even though we might work here.
Sure, they've already got the Middle East turned up to explode. Now they're going to enter.
Now you've just split the West. Now it's going to be America plus Israel, Trump and Netanyahu, versus countries like Spain and New Zealand. So you've just split the alliance because we're going to have to do counter punishments against Spain for what happened on the Security Council, which should have never happened because this was an Obama move. This was an Obama moving the chess piece play. It had nothing to do with.
And don't you agree it's a very aggressive, violent move?
It's a very aggressive, violent move. It's an existential threat to Israel to say that as of the time that resolution passed, East Jerusalem, which is the Wailing Wall, the original King temples, where Christian sites like cavalry, all of that's going to be under Muslim control. That's an existential threat. And by doing this, he split the West, putting countries like Spain and New Zealand.
I agree. Stay there then. We come back. Before we go to calls, I'm going to give you the floor for like 5 minutes. Matt Bracken, what does that signify the next move will be? As you just said, split the West, plunge the Middle East from being in total chaos into war, tie that into the Russian planes getting shot down, the ambassadors. This looks like the build-up to World War I, but now with nuclear weapons. It just came out a few months ago, and even the Jerusalem papers picked it up, where George Soros was plotting in WikiLeaks a way to overthrow Israel. There it is. George Soros criticized by pro-Israel groups as conspiracy theorists seize on Open Society Foundation leak. I love how, what newspaper is that? The London Independent makes a joke, calls it conspiracy theorist when it's in his Open Foundation saying the plan is to overthrow Israel and make it a UN state. With the Pope, who now says open Europe up to Islam. I mean, you see where all this is going. And I'm not against the Catholics, folks. I got a lot of friends that are Catholic. This new Pope is not a Catholic by any real Catholics stretch of the imagination. But you can see the geopolitical systems. You can pull up the WikiLeaks. Just Google George Soros, WikiLeaks, Israel. And you can read where they're talking about how they're going to censor our media, how they're going to end our free press, how they're going to overthrow Israel. And it's just crazy. So I wanted Matt Bracken, before we go to some more phone calls, people like Chris and Dustin who are patiently holding, and get into where this is going, because I don't see how George Soros, who seems to be in charge of most of this, has that much energy at almost 90. And now every time I turn around, he's behind it. Gun control, open borders, anti-Christian stuff. He's a weirdo, Nazi collaborator. He's got Hollywood and the left behind him. A lot of leftist Jews are behind him. And it's just crazy to know that they're actually moving forward with this, starting wars with Russia. I don't want that, so I'm called a Russian agent. I don't want war with Israel. I'm not an Israeli agent. Never been to Israel. I'd like to go there sometime. It's very historic. But it's just the level of insanity. What do they think they're going to get out of this? I guess order out of chaos. So your take on that, Matt Bracken, and then what comes next as all these red lines are passed? What if Kerry does come out with this resolution that reportedly Netanyahu's worried about? It's up on InfoWars.com, that completely recognizes Palestine. Well, Palestine says they don't recognize Israel. What does that then trigger?
Well, this is going to be a huge crisis. And what's going to happen next is, well, to back up just a half step, but we have to understand that what's being broadcast in the entire Muslim world right now, especially, of course, the Palestinians, is that the UN, the legal sanctioned body of the world government, remember, UN's not even a country, so that to them the UN is the big Megillah, has declared that the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and East Jerusalem are crimes, that Israel is an outlaw state. So what we're going to see at the city level and inside of Israel is a massive intifada, where they're going to, for example, start assaulting Jews anywhere near the Dome of the Rock, throwing rocks down at them, all of that, daring them to do anything about it. Then they're going to progress into an intifada stage, throwing rocks at the police in East Jerusalem, saying, get out, you're occupiers.
And this will then be taken as a green light for bigger attacks in Europe and the United States.
Well, the next thing that happens, though, is that it's going to put the UN versus Trump and Netanyahu, Israel and the U.S. So it's very likely. I mean, even Krauthammer last night said they should turn the UN building into a new Trump Tower and sell condos. You know, the thinking about either withholding funds, which would be a first step, the 22%, the couple billion a year we pay to the UN, withhold their 22%, and maybe even ask them to close the building in New York at some point. But this will be the whole world, the globalists, versus what they will portray as the rogue outlaw United States and Israel. So you've already got like Spain and countries like Spain and New Zealand, you would think would be safely on our side, are going to find themselves on another side of this divide. It's going to be the U.S. plus Israel versus the world, with Trump saying, I'm leaving the UN. And without the UN, without the United States, it's no more than the League of Nations. And we know what happened. The League of Nations was, you know, a precursor to World War II. So, but as far as how the war will unfold, I'm not as worried about missiles crossing. There's this new step now in a new form of warfare, which we've seen how it works with Russia versus Ukraine. You know, you can, like watching the Spanish Civil War in the 30s, you can get some ideas about how World War II is going to be fought, you know, with Stukas and Blitzkrieg, things like that. But now looking at Russia and Ukraine, they don't just fire artillery. They gave some guys a missile that they shot down the Air Malaysia, Air Indonesia. But in general, the next step, there's a step short of shooting down enemy planes, which is turning off Kiev's electricity. So we can already see how this will work at a state level.
Sure, we've already seen them blowing up the power plants and blowing up the power lines, and we already see them using jihadists.
But they just did. But last week in Kiev, they turned out Kiev's power just by corrupting their data, so that the engineers were looking at gibberish on their screens. That was a warning shot to the government of Ukraine and Kiev. And we're going to see, instead of, you know, fail-safe scenario with B-52s and ICBMs, what we're going to see is cities having their electricity go off, and everybody on the other side saying, don't look at me, I don't know what you're talking about. But when the action-reaction is going to be, I think, more going against infrastructure grids, because you can do that without leaving the missile trail through space.
Sure, and then even the stay-behind networks of the globalists could probably stage attacks on our grid and blame it on Russia. They've set the table for that. So geopolitically, Matt Bracken, then we're going to calls, looking at this, is this arrogance by the Soros globalists, by the Rothschilds, Rockefeller Combine, or do they really think putting the world into this crisis, they'll be able to maybe put enough pressure on Trump to direct him? Because it seems to me it's a major further miscalculation. Let me answer the second part.
I think it's desperation. I think it's pure desperation. They didn't think Brexit was going to win. All of their fake polls didn't matter, which are just psyops. All the fake polls, you know, ABC, fake news ABC, saying a week before that Hillary was up by double digits. That was the big lead story in all the media after that ABC poll. Trump is just collapsing. You know, she's up by 12. All the psyops, all the polls, the people are now seeing that these are just psyops. More people
so you're answering the second part of my question. Sure, you're answering the second part of my question, Matt, before I got to it. So let me throw it out there. Is it calculated? Because as earlier you said, it is, you know, very, very cunning, but it doesn't work, because then it just separates Americanism versus globalism that much more, and then discredits their entire push. So here's the problem, though.
It works. Well, it works. It works as far as if part of the goal is out of order chaos and that they wouldn't mind World War III. In that sense, yes. If it blows up, blowing up is all right to George Soros.
Sure, it only works if you're completely insane.
But yeah, but you know, he's got jets that can cover, and he can land in any continent in 10 hours. You know, he's not worried about himself or, you know, people that matter to him. The rest of us are. It's like the Greek gods just looking down and playing with the humans. You know,
I was about to say there's also a phenomenon in history with old powerful men. They either get real sweet and give everything away, or they tend to get more maniacal and start thinking of end of days, death cult stuff. And Soros has talked about this before. He believes he's a messiah, and if he can't have things, people should just die.
And if he can't be victorious, I think that he would rather at least see that his place in history, the virtual Mount Rushmore, will have his face on it, because every history book written in the future, good, bad, or not indifferent, good or bad, George Soros is going to be a chapter. George Soros led to World War III and the death of 100 million, or George Soros led the new global order and was the first George Washington of the world government. Either way, he sees himself on top of history. His days are slipping, even with all the Swiss blood transfusions and the baby fetuses probably being put in his morning Wheaties. It won't last forever. He probably has new organs. He probably has a lot of things, but his body is going to eventually completely fail, and he'll be gone. They can't stick if he could, he would stick his brain into some 25-year-old's body, but he can't do that yet. The next best thing is to burn it all down, take it all down, either completely victorious, first George Washington.
Sure, and that's the psychology. And at this point, George Soros must be stopped. He's done enough. We know he's a criminal. What do you think about the leftists, though? Like you said, all these crazy professors coming out and saying whites are inherently evil, let's kill them when they're white. What do you make of the left in this giant hysterical meltdown, so upset that Donald Trump wants to cut their taxes? I think it shows what a mental patient cult it is.
Yeah, brainwashing works is what I take from it. The North Koreans that are wailing and sobbing when they hear bad news about the last dear leader dying or whatever, they're not faking it. Brainwashing works. You can even brainwash white people to hate their own background, skin color, culture, everything about themselves. And the only way they can expiate their guilt and shame is to somehow do whatever you can, like this white professor calling for white genocide. That's the depth and success of brainwashing. Brainwashing really works. And there's nowhere that brainwashes better than our universities.
That's right. They take young, scared kids, put them into these group forums, and just bully them into submission. And it's truly, truly sickening. I want to take a few phone calls here with Matt Bracken, and then when we do the next segment, we'll get into some of this whole AI thing that's invading the home, and then I'm going to shoot a special report tonight on it. I've really not been procrastinating. It's such a big issue. I haven't gotten to it yet.
For sure. The power of computation has allowed us to, run this whole just-in-time economy. The food goes from the field to the supermarket just perfectly. So we've leveraged our populations way beyond the normal carrying capacity in cities like, Los Angeles, San Diego, Phoenix, that only have local water, very little local water.
Time bombs.
So we think that we're replacing God in a sense. Perfect knowledge. Some huge master brain will have perfect knowledge. It'll be like the movie THX 1138. Everybody's at a console just being told when to sleep and when to go to work. But I don't believe that. I think that we'll see a huge system failure.
By the way, Bloomberg admits his plan is like THX 1138, where a console tells you everything, and quote, he programs it. I mean, these are megalomaniacs.
And the problem that I see is that millennials, and maybe with each generation older, a little bit less, but I think that children and millennials will absolutely wait all night, like, before Black Friday. They'll wait all night to be the first one to be chipped. If the chip is going to give them, broadband access everywhere, they wouldn't. The whole notion of personal privacy draws a blank stare from them. They could care less.
And what's crazy about this is the phone is already a chip you carry around that tracks, that traces you. You watch these videos of riots and shootings and insanity all over the country, and it's little millennials and kids walking around looking only at their screen, leading them through all of the insanity that the hive mind has brought them to, and you can see the true fall of humanity.
Right, and that's why the reason my new novel is so long in coming, I stopped to write some pretty big short stories like Alas, Brave New Babylon, which I hope people will Google that title and read it, because there's a real bad worst case scenario for a system failure, because we can't feed ourselves. You can fool yourself in a lot of ways. It's easy to fool yourself, think that through the normalcy bias tells us that millions of people can live in places like Los Angeles and Phoenix forever. Well, let me tell you, without electricity and water moving, they can't. Just like the Anasazi people in Chaco Canyon, New Mexico, those people, they built big cities and they outran their ecology, so to speak, and just
That's right.
Crash.
And the globalists admit they're setting up a system where it's artificially going to start imploding. They're going to use that for social engineering and then finally let it completely implode.
They'll never be able to control that. It'll be a runaway. It'll be a runaway chain reaction.
I was about to say, look at hundreds of thousands starving to death in African countries every few months. Hundreds of thousands starving, death, murder. First the zoo animals, then the house animals. Now they're eating people in Venezuela. The media is trying to cover it up. Total insanity.
Any country, forget Venezuela and Africa. That's, being
No, I agree, but notice how we just don't think about that.
But in a war situation, I'm not worried about the missile over the ice cap. I'm worried about some hackers, could be Russia, but we won't be able to prove it, turning our lights out. Our cities are time bombs. Without electricity, our cities are as vulnerable as if they were living. And I'll say it again,
the Russians have said they don't want to do that. It's the globalists that are the masters of this. They've put everything in. They've got the kill switches. The #1 suspect is the Obama types, that if they can't control it all, they want to burn it down. Obama told Africans, you can't have credit cards, you can't have credit cards, you can't have cars, you can't have air conditioning. They're already telling us. Go ahead, Matt.
But Russia will be the boogeyman, just like with the election. That was another tell. That was another giveaway.
Sure, they're preparing them to be the boogeyman in the future, saying if there's ever a cyber attack, we're going to blame Russia.
The Russians did it, just like they stole the election from poor Hillary. So yeah, no matter who it is, it's almost sure that whatever the fingerprints are on the mission will be false fingerprints.
That's right. Let's take a call.
They used a Cyrillic keyboard. It wasn't the Russians, for sure. But we won't know. We'll be debating years later who killed the power.
It's an incredible time, Matt. Matt Bracken is our guest. Matt Bracken, stay right there. Again, is it better for people to visit your website, enemiesforeignanddomestic.com, or the Gates of Vienna?
.com. I just post some of my short stories are posted on Gates of Vienna. You can look for me there. But my short stories are floating around the internet. Also on Western Rifle Shooters Association, which isn't a target practicing club. It's like Western as in civilization.
We need to stop it from happening. We need to say you can't restrict the free speech. The FCC under the CIA and the Department of State doesn't have any right to do this. This is a Cass Sunstein plan that got rejected 8 years ago. We have to say no to them, not just make preparations for it to come into play. Like, if I see you in helmets, I'm going to start shooting. Let's stop it from ever getting to that point. And again, as Bracken said, it's kind of like their submarines getting blown up. They're firing torpedoes as we speak. Their subs going under. They already launched the torpedoes. Trump needs to take those torpedoes out. So I'll take his analogy and go one further. They got their torpedoes off. Trump has to address this. We have to make a big deal out of it, Matt.
Well, for sure, censorship and control of means of getting new knowledge. That's what it's all about. As we've been talking about since the election, the left can't learn. They're stuck. They're trapped in a lot of their own biases and their own mindset, and so they now think that the key is just get rid of Alex Jones, Rush Limbaugh, Breitbart News, et cetera. Go down the list, and get people so that they can only listen to ABC and NBC, New York Times, Washington Post. I think that ship has sailed. Now Europe, though, like in a lot of subjects, Europe provides the canary in the coal mine. They don't have a First Amendment, and in Germany, you will get warned, arrested, lose your job for saying things not nearly
fined. So again, that's what Cass Sunstein called for.
Yeah. So control of knowledge, control of information is key, and it's going to be a battle to see if they can accomplish it, or if we would just keep making workarounds. I mean, if we had to go to the point of saying, all right, I won't say communists, I'll just say, our brothers of the left. I mean, they'll have a term of censorship, and we'll have a term that's a euphemism.
That's right. Historically, it only makes resistance intensify once censorship takes place. If the spirit of the people strong, it becomes a big game kicking their butt. So the answer is get more involved than ever. The way internet censorship works, he signed the bill. This is going on, is they have big mass filters against everybody. Then they try to call people out individually and fine or fee them. And the Chinese have a model that we're now adopting of an internet profile where you get down votes for criticizing government and big corporations. So it's a social profile score that's like the mark of the beast. Mr. Bracken, closing comments. on that.
It's truly, political correctness is polite censorship. It's just censorship without, the shooting and the gulags. But, you're put at threat of losing your job. That's pretty significant. Ask Cheryl Atkinson about people coming out and, doing computer work that she didn't ask for. She wrote a book about it called Stonewalled. And as far as anybody interested in my short pieces, I have links to all of my short pieces, most of them on my website on a links page. I would recommend folks read like Alas, Brave New Babylon. That's the end of a cyber war that I see, where the power goes down. But yeah, as long as we can, we have to push as far as we can against censorship. This is really if we lose this battle, then we have no control at all. But I think that the Trump election did show us that the people are smart enough to work around the psyops. And because of shows like yours and Breitbart and so forth, we do see the mainstream media as psyops now. So it's no longer working. Once you see the man behind the curtain pulling the levers, you never go back to believing in Oz.
That's right.
It's over.
That's right, Matt.
They're trying to get us to believe in Oz again, but it's too late.
Yeah, no matter how big the new phantasm is, no matter how big the projection, the hologram, we know it's a little guy behind the curtain, and we're all Toto now. I think what it comes down to. Well, listen, have a great New Year coming up. I want to thank you for everything, Matt Bracken, and the listeners. God bless you.
If you look at Bill Clinton, far worse, minor words, and his was action. His was what he's done to women. There's never been anybody in the history of politics in this nation that's been so abusive to women. Bill Clinton was abusive to women. Hillary Clinton attacked those same women and attacked them viciously. 4 of them here tonight.
So much of what he's just said is not right, but he gets to run his campaign any way he chooses.